What's up, guys? Frank here with the one and only Greg McIntosh, better known as songwriter and guitar player for Paradise Lost. But he's about to release a beautifully orchestrated Dreadful Time with his new project Host.
I think that's a thank you. I'm not sure. I'm not
No,
sure whether that's a good or a bad thing.
it absolutely is because it is. I think you're just kind of the king of sad music, and
Oh,
I truly adore the new album, especially as a lifetime Paradise Lost fan. I just found this an album to dig into for sure. And it actually reminds me some of the elements that you started introducing on classic records like 1 Second and carried through to other albums, of course, before focusing on, the heavy again. Is
mhm.
this project a new way to scratch that dark electronic itch that you haven't had for a couple of years now?
I think so, but really the the thing was I'd been doing writing all the latest Paradise Lost records, and then I had a side project called Valenfire which finished, and then another one called Strigoi which started. So it was a lot of heavy stuff all at once, and I just thought, I need a bit of respite to keep my head clear on all this stuff. And about 5 years ago, I thought, well, I'll start toying around with the electronic stuff again. And I did. And then the lockdown stuff started happening. And it was no fun to do on your own, really. So I thought, okay, we'll call it Host. I'll see if Nick's interested, and we'll see if we can write some hooks to this stuff as well without it just being sound design. And and the whole thing kicked off. And I have no idea why Nuclear Blast signed it, because it's the last label I thought that would sign it. But I guess in this, with the metal scene these days, there's lots of, it's much more open than it used to be. There's Carpenter, Brut, and Perturbator on metal bills now. So.
Right. And that was actually something I did want to talk about. I mean, like, we are in this change, where like metal is this blanket term, really, where it encompasses, a lot of different things that are metal adjacent. As long as it has this like dark sound to it, it's almost kind of
Mhm.
metal. Was that another reason that you just felt like now is the time to do something like this?
The first thing that made me think about doing it again was, I was at a festival in Bergen in Norway about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was all pretty much all black metal bands apart from Paradise Lost. So I'm not sure how that came about, but anyway, we did it. And I was talking to a couple of real old school black metal guys, and they said to me, "Do you know, we really like your Host album?" And I said, "What? It's taken you 15 years to like it, or something?" And they said, "Well, you couldn't really say you liked it back then, and it wasn't really the thing. It didn't fit in. It was a square album in a round metal scene at the time. New metal was just becoming big, I guess, and stuff like that. Um, but I guess over time, it's not frowned upon as much as it used to be. And yeah, that first piqued my interest, and then we did a remaster of the Host album. And listening back to those songs after not hearing them for a while made me kind of think, oh, well, it'd be interesting to touch on this stuff again. And then, things just moved on, but very slowly. If it wasn't for the pandemic, it wouldn't have ever got finished or done as an album.
Yeah, I think that could be said about a lot of bands
Yeah, yeah,
going
yeah.
out right now.
Mhm.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, I remember, in the '90s, I was a metalhead who was dating, goth industrial girls and going out to the clubs, and I think that's
Yeah,
like a popular storyline.
yeah,
And
yeah.
it was one of those things where you didn't tell like your other metal friends that like where you were last night, because it was just like you didn't want
Yeah,
to get
yeah,
ridiculed. But
yeah. Mm.
things are changed. I do want to take it back to '97 for a moment because I do think that 1 Second was such an amazing record, way ahead of its time, and really the first instance. Of course, he went on to do Host, which was like purely that, but it was the first instance that I can even think of where a metal band actively created dark wave songs meant for a metal audience, and honestly changed what was happening at the time and gave way to other metal bands experimenting with electronic sounds and stuff. What was the mindset of Paradise Lost and yourself at the time to make that shift happen in the first place?
I mean, really, it was rebelliousness, which sounds kind of back to front because metal's supposed to be the rebellious music, but to us, it was starting to become a bit stagnant, not rebellious. And as it turns out, it's become, I mean, mainstream metal now is safer than pop music. It's all got the same production, the same everything. It's kind of just like lukewarm water. But yeah, it was starting to get a little bit repetitive, a bit like being on a treadmill to us. And as much as we love it, you need a bit of respite there. And to us, being the rebellious thing to do was do something that was unexpected, I guess, by the audience. And at the time, I was toying with these technologies. I think at the time it was Atari computers and Akai samplers and things like that, and 2 megabyte floppy disks. So it was time consuming. But also when we got Sank involved on the production, Sank and Sanquist, who did the 1 Second album production, he had kind of a grounding in that sort of music, and he kind of helped shape that album quite a bit on at least a third of the songs of the album. For instance, there's a song called Mercy on that album, on 1 Second album, and the original demos for that it was a full-on metal song. It was more like something off Draconian Times. And during pre-production with Sank, it slowly became something else. And so did we. It was like it was a learning process. It was slow. And if we hadn't have done, I think we did a couple of months pre-production on the 1 Second album. And it really changed the feel of the record and how we approached it and how we went moving forward from that as well.
I mean, the name Host, as we've been talking about, of course, is the name of the Paradise Lost seventh record. And it's an album that I think fans considered a departure from metal entirely, and I personally, I don't remember exactly like how fans kind of took to it. I'm sure you probably remember much closer. Did you consider other names for this project, or was it always going to be, a hat tip to your past?
Yeah, I mean, it is a hat tip, but it's not meant to be carrying on from Host the record. It's meant to be I mean, the reason I wanted to do this is because I was reconnecting with the influences that I had on Host the record. So I guess the connection is I wanted to feel that vibe again, but I didn't want to recreate the Host record or even carry it on. It's its own thing. So it was try to get back in touch with what made me want to do that record in the first place, and the excitement that surrounded it, and the lack of pressure that we felt when we were doing it. It was pure excitement because we just signed to EMI. They were throwing money around like it was water, and we just took full advantage of that and did what the hell we wanted. And I wanted to do something because no one was asking for this Host project. No one expected it. There's absolutely zero pressure. We don't have to go in any one particular direction. So the connection to Host was just recreating or revisiting what made me first want to do that record in the first place, which was the alternative clubs of the 80s, which is a lot of different types of music. It's not just goth or electronic. It's, it touches on new wave and stadium rock, even, and stuff like that. You know, all these things were blended together in these alternative clubs. You'd have punk, you'd have post punk, you'd have goth, electronica, metal, all kinds of stuff. And we're just kind of shaking up a little pot and seeing what comes out, you know.
I mean, that's one thing I think that comes across is that it's genuine. You know, it's always been clear to me that you write electronic music as a true fan and not trying to cash in on a trend or anything. I mean, you've even worked with, you know, some of the greats out there. Of course, my buddy Reese Fulber, I know that you worked with him before. You know, like, so was electronic music always part of your upbringing? Like, or did metal come first? Or like, how did that work out?
Actually, I found out about electronic music, punk, metal, and all of it all in one go because I all this to my older brother, who's 3, 4 years older than me, and he just had a huge record collection. And I shared a bedroom with my younger brother, and he had his own bedroom with all these records all over the walls. And I just used to, when I got my first turntable, I just used to go in his room and just steal records to play. And he was a skinhead at the time, like oi music, but he had everything from Tubeway Army, Bowie records, you know, things like that, to hardcore punk, Discharge, stuff like that, and Motorhead, and I don't know, just a huge mixture of things. And I just found out about it all together, really. So I would have heard something like Tubeway Army, Gary Newman's early stuff, at the same time that I first heard Motorhead and Discharge, you know, all around 82, something like that. You know, I was 12 years old. It's when I got into music. So it was, you know, you stop playing with Star Wars figures and start listening to music, or a bit of both at the same time, 12, 13, you know, it's kind of, but yeah. So, and I just took to punk more, I guess, at the time. And I don't know why, just did. Like the aggression of it and the looseness of it, honesty of it, I guess. And then I sort of slowly slipped into metal, but all this stuff stays with you, you know. It's always there somewhere in the background.
I feel that you personally have your own sound in songwriting, and which is literally the hardest thing to do in music as far as I'm concerned. You know, that said, what do you feel are the greatest inspirations for something like Host? Are you listening to, you know, the classic electronic stuff? Are you dipping into some of the newer stuff? What, you know, where are you in that realm?
Well, I think it's not listening to any one thing, not dwelling on any one thing, you know, and not even specific eras of a certain person's career. You know, for a lot of the cleaner guitar parts, I would have been thinking about like Susie and the Banshees or something like that. You know, maybe early Cure or something. For some of the more distorted parts, it would have been more the, I don't know, Christian Death, but also stuff like I say, maybe in Duran Duran and Simple Minds. You know, not that I was a fan of that stuff at the time, but I thought it would be interesting to include that as part of this package. You know, as part of the whole thing that was going on. You know, for instance, I don't know if you've heard the whole thing. Have you heard the whole record?
Many times, yeah.
Oh, right, okay. Well, there's certain tracks on there that you think, oh, it's gonna be a complete electronic, pulsing electronic song, and then all of a sudden there's some kind of 80s rock chorus. You know, it's and I like that kind of dichotomy. You know, it was touched upon by certain bands in the 80s. You know, I know the Sisters did it when they did Floodland album. You know, they got rock producers involved and started to have these big rock choruses, even though it was still technically a drum machine and a bass player. You know, so yeah, I'm mixing a lot of things up, mixing a lot of styles and genres up, but it's all, the only thing that ties it together is at some point or another it's affected me, and that's it. You know, and when it started off as the bio kind of reads wrong on the biog on this. It says it started as a solo project, but it didn't. It started as me just messing around to clear my head as a palate cleanser to writing all this heavy stuff. And I guess in the back of my head, I was thinking if I did something with it, it would be more along the lines of when Alan Wilder left Depeche Mode and did his Recoil stuff, where it's kind of just, it's not aimed at anyone. It's just pure enjoyment, you know. And with the pandemic, then it became more of a hook and song orientated thing.
But it's really interesting that you say that it wasn't a solo endeavor. Is that, I guess, because you knew at some point you would have other players on it, you just didn't know who? Because this was confusing how like Nick wound up getting involved and when, or really why he wasn't your first thought. Like you didn't start the band and be like, oh well, it's going to be Nick automatically. Was there other things that you had in mind?
It wasn't started as a thing for anyone else to hear, even. Almost. It was like I'd done 2 or 3 tracks of instrumental music in this style, and I was enjoying doing it, and I was just continuing to do it. And then all of a sudden we couldn't tour. And this host thing, then I thought, it's not fun to just be on your own doing this kind of stuff. So just see if someone else has a different spin on it and takes it somewhere else. And Nick seemed the obvious choice because I called it host. At first I thought maybe a female vocalist, but then I thought there's only a very small handful of bands involved in the inspiration of this project that had female vocalists on. So, I don't know, it just seemed the obvious choice to me. Maybe it could have turned out totally differently, but it wasn't started with any kind of commercial prospect or audience in mind. It was more just pure enjoyment, because it's my hobby as well. I mean, a lot of musicians, they just like to sit and tinker in their studios, and I'm no different.
Right. Now that it is done and about to be released and out, like, do you feel it is meant more for the metal audience or more for electronic fans?
I, I didn't for a minute think the metal audience would like it at all. But seriously, I thought when Nuclear Blast expressed interest, I was kind of shocked. Yeah, I thought, some metal fans might like it. Some people who, I don't know how the scene's opened up so much. I guess, the 80s thing with Perturbator and Carpenter Brut and bands of that ilk, Ghost, etc. But that's not really my thing. I appreciate those guys, but it's not really my thing. I'm more into classic songwriting and a bit of sound design, But yeah, when Nuclear Blast, when we said, yeah, cool, if you want to put it out, great. Then it became evident that certain people at Nuclear Blast were trying to put it in the same vein as this new synthwave thing, like with getting Goss to remix a track and stuff. And we said, yeah, but it isn't really that. It's got nothing to do with that. It's, it's. I understand labels have to come up with an angle, but to me, it doesn't fit into that scene at all. It's just its own thing own mishmash of styles. And speaking of Reese, by the way, Reese just got in touch with Nick, and he's just done a remix of the fourth single, so that's going to be coming out right before the album. And he's done a great job. It's proper dance club type remix thing he's done.
Right. Yeah. He's good at that. So, with both Paradise Lost and Host, one unifying factor is really the absolutely beautiful way that you write melancholy. It's, it truly hits you in the feels as a listener. Do you feel that that comes from a place where you yourself feel sadness?
I think it comes from. I mean, when you're really, really sad, the last thing you want to do is write music. You don't want to do anything. But it comes from a place of understanding it, I guess, like having hit those lows and being a very. I'm not a social type guy. I don't hang around with people. I don't go out. I don't. Very insular. Um, and I've had some very low lows, and I guess you kind of draw on that to as an influence. But if you're in that frame of mind, you certainly can't write music. So it's weird when I see people say that they have to get depressed to write music. I don't know how you can. I don't know how you can do that, because if you're depressed, you don't even get out of bed. Never mind write a song, you know. But it is there. It is part of it. It's just understanding it, I suppose, or what moves you. You know, I've always thought of music in more in other sensory terms, like if someone says to me, you know, what's this song like? If I'm listening to another band and someone asks me to describe it, I'll use it. I'll say things like, you know, it reminds me of a storm coming in on the shore or something. You know, I find it hard to describe things in terms of other bands or other pieces of music. It's more a visual or a, you know, sensory thing, and that's how I write as well. I just think, does this speak to me on this level? Does this remind me of a certain thing? You know, and I guess that's just the way I've always thought of it. Thought of music in general. You know.
Yeah, I mean, I actually have this saying, which many hear me say all the time, that sad music is the only real music out there. You know, no matter what genre, even pop music, I gravitate immediately to the saddest songs that an artist writes, just to see what they're made of, you know, because
Mm-hmm.
it comes from the heart, a place of pure passion, and it's not just hands or, you know, something contrived. As a legend in, you know, the sad music department, how do you feel about, you know, happy music out there?
I hate it. I've never liked a happy song. I don't think. Um, that's my only boundary in music. Really, it has to be sad. Or yeah, I mean, I love ABBA, for instance, but I think ABBA are a sad band. They're the kings and queens of sad pop. You know, it's like a song like SOS is minor key heaven. You know, it's absolutely tragic, but it's upbeat and catchy. It's kind of really hard to do. That's what I find hardest about doing stuff like this host material is you can get the hook, you can get a catchy line, um, but to make it truly melancholy and have it ear candy catchy as well is kind of a almost a dichotomy, and it's hard to marry the two and make any sense out of it. And in a way, that's much harder than writing it with Paradise Lost, because with Paradise Lost, it's kind of like you can do it with the guitar melodies, you can do all this drenched in sadness type, you know, or distorted guitars and heavy drums and all this. But with this stuff, you've got kind of almost upbeat, catchy things going on, and you've got to still somehow get the tragedy in there, and it's not an easy thing to do. I don't think, not for me at least. Anyway, it's because the two seem almost polar opposite in definition. You know.
But you've done it well. I mean, I think you pulled it off. So,
Well,
and
thanks for that. I mean, it's subjective. I mean, as to whether you do or not. I mean, when we finish the record, we're like, yes, we think we've done it, but then the proof is in whoever listens to it. You know.
of course, yeah. I mean, all music is subjective,
Yeah,
of course. But
yeah,
you've had a career now. Speaking of which, you've had a career now for 35 years this year,
mm,
and I'm sure you've learned a few things along the way about yourself, your band, the industry, things you don't like. After 35 years of making music, where do you continue to find, you know, the happier moments or the willpower to still get you excited in doing another record? Or
I still see it as a learning curve. It still feels like I'm just learning all the time. Every day I get up, and if I'm listening to music or I look online or something, it's all like always there's something new to learn. There's something new to pick up on. Um, I'd say the majority of the things that excite me musically are hidden in Bandcamp somewhere. I troll Bandcamp constantly and go off recommendation to recommendation, and I find things constantly. I found one last week, a band called Dead Bird. Never heard before, and it's not the kind of thing that I would. The way they describe themselves makes me think I would hate them. They mention post screamo and stuff like that, and I'm like, oh fuck no. But you listen to a bit of a track, and it's like, hang on a minute, this is like, I don't know, it's like nothing I've ever heard before, and there's lots of uh, post punk kind of gothic influences on the guitars, and interesting ways the melodies come into play, and it's stuff like that that excites me. I get excited about it, and I think, wow, it's you've never found the end of it. You think you get into the not the pinnacle, but you think you get into. I remember at the end of the '90s, I thought no one's ever going to come with a new way of doing this or that, and all of a sudden, someone completely schools you on it and comes up with a new way of doing something, and opens yet another door that you can go through. So, yeah, to me, I get completely excited and fanboyish about bands that haven't been signed, and going to little gigs, and you like see the passion in it, and the way someone's blended something with something else that you wouldn't have thought of doing. It's yeah, it's wonderful. It's wonderful, and I think having a son who's like in his early 20s, and he's really into music. He grew up on Sabbath and stuff like that, but he's completely into. I mean, he's into a lot of stuff that I can't stand as well. But it's nice to feed off that kind of excitement for music.
yeah, kind of like that new sponge around where you're actually getting fed yourself. And speaking of introducing elements and changing things up, I mean, obviously you were a guitar player. At what point did you start dabbling with electronic music? Like, did you start on keyboards and then outboards, and like what kind of gear are you working with throughout something like this?
Well, it's got a lot easier, obviously, over the years. When I first started, it was after um, I think it was '96. I would have said. So it was during the touring of Draconian Times when I was starting to get really beaten down with um, metal being samey, and including ourselves. It just felt like a treadmill. So I decided to diversify a bit in just my hobby. So I switched from, for instance, when I wrote Draconian Times, it was on what you'd call a boombox, a cassette recorder this big with a red button for record, and that's it. That's all the early career up till '95 was written on this thing. And then all of a sudden, there were other things that came in. So I got this keyboard off my guitar tech at the time. I bought it off him, called an Ensoniq ASR 10, which was a sampling keyboard. So what you did, you put floppy disks in, and then you'd have that sound or whatever. And it had a loop function of about, I don't know, maybe 5 seconds or something. And that's how I wrote the song 1 second. Ding, 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 ding. Just that loop. I only had that space of loop. So it was like, okay, I got this ding, 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 loop that, then come up with something behind, over it, and then something else over it. And I liked that way of doing things. So that set me off on a path. Then I got a Korg. No, I didn't get a Korg first. I got a Kurzweil K2000. Then I got a couple of Korg keyboards, and then I got into, you could do it on a computer, so I got an Atari, and the Host album was done on Ataris and Akai samplers with 2 MB floppy disks for storage. And yeah, it's very time consuming, very time consuming. So now it's much easier to do it, obviously. But if the ideas aren't there, you may as well still have a 2 MB floppy disk, you know.
Right. That's so true. I mean, you have recorded quite a lot of music in your time. Throughout your career, what do you feel was the most difficult song that you ever recorded, and why?
The most difficult album to do was Believe in Nothing after Host, because we were not in a good frame of mind as a band and as a person, and the label, because they'd given us so much freedom on Host, and it didn't go top 10 in the charts in every country. They held our hand through a recording process and remixed it themselves 3 times in different studios where without us there. So that was the most difficult period of recording, but for probably different reasons than you're asking the question. The most difficult songs to record are probably experimental stuff. So it's exciting to do that, to do, experiment as you're recording, but it's kind of frustrating for the producer, frustrating for the rest of the band, and becomes time consuming and possibly might end in a dead end where you end up back at the start again. So fortunately, with the technology, you do it all ahead of time now. But back in the day, in the 90s, you had to do it in the studio. You didn't have any other option than to try certain things out in the studio. And you'd end up going over budget and get label and people moaning at you and stuff like that. And, sometimes you get results, sometimes you wouldn't. Or sometimes you wish you could have gone further, but you didn't have the time or the tools to do it. Overall, by the time we finish a record, I'm always fairly happy with it, with a couple of exceptions.
Never fully satisfied.
Well, I'm always on to the next thing, even on a song. It's like I write a song, right, on to the next thing. Forget about that. Forget about the one I've just done. So, but that's my major downfall. I'm too easily bored, and Nick kind of anchors it, because Host probably would have been way off the charts experimental if it wasn't for someone like Nick being a little more staid. And
Well,
he's the
now I'm
opposite.
curious to hear what you would do if Greg Unleashed. Just
Oh, it'd be unlistenable. It'd be completely off in some weird direction that probably wouldn't even be classed as music anymore.
Awesome.
So I do need someone to rein me in.
Yeah, well, who knows? Maybe you'll start another genre.
Maybe a bit late for that. Who knows? Who knows? But yeah, it's. I'm just the experimenter. I have fun doing it, and then Nick kind of pulls me back a bit, and it's needed. It is, because I'm too frivolous, and
Are you gonna wind up playing Host Live? Is that like a thing that you already have in your head?
it's something we're thinking about. But we're rolling with the punches on this one. So it's one thing releasing some videos on YouTube and have some people say that's pretty cool. Then it is, the album comes out in February. I guess see how it does. See how much interest it gets. See if people want to see it live, and then maybe try and get some offers. And if we get the right offers, then we'll do some gigs. So it's the logistics of touring and gigging these days is a bit of a nightmare, just because of even well-established bands are having a hard time putting tours together, doing gigs, because financially it's kind of hard to do. Fuel costs, etc. It's just, but yeah, hopefully we will be able to put something together. We'll see how it goes.
Well, keep on doing what you're doing, man. I mean, Host is a great fucking record. Of course, we're also celebrating everything you do with Paradise Lost and your career in general, man. And thank you. It's always great talking to you. And everybody who hasn't heard it or picked it up or pre-order, Host now. The album's called Nine. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too, Frank. Yeah, nice to speak to you.